Okay, so welcome to the last week 11. So today we're going to be doing two topics because they got like more topics than we've got weeks. So we're going to do two topics today, and then also just want to spend like the last 5 or 10 minutes just going through the exam and what you expect there and preparations and all that. So we didn't have a quiz like before. We had just that you had to do your own little mock exam. So I don't know how everybody did on which questions and which ones people didn't do well on, so I'm not going to go through those. If there are any questions that you're unsure about, the explanation on Enthaware didn't satisfy your needs for knowledge, you can always just email Rory or email me. We can see if we can help out. So everybody, no chats. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be looking at timers and security. So first looking at timers, and like all of the other topics, it's sort of looking at what timers are, creating them, using them, managing them. So it sort of sits around the scheduling bit when you look at a little diagram. So timers are there when you need to have certain functions which are time sort of bonded. So either something like if somebody makes an order and you need to send a reminder email that you're going to deliver it in like a day's time, or there's some other auditing that needs to happen on your system and you want that to kick off every night at midnight, or some cleanups, so stuff like that, which will just be easy using a scheduler. You can also set the schedulers in the EJBs to be robust enough so they're persistent. So even if the server goes down or it crashes and comes back up again, the timer will still fire. But except if the whole data center burns down and there's no backups, but otherwise that should go. It should survive that. Yeah. The timer services on the EJBs, they aren't like real time, so they're not to the microsecond pinpoint exact. So don't use timers to do time precise type things, something like if you're using some stock market type things where milliseconds makes a difference, don't use timers for that. And then another important thing to remember is that the timeout methods, when those callbacks call, there's no security context, because I can call it any time. It's actually the server executing that. It's not that you're executing it or there's user logged in that's executing it. So the way that the timers work, that little diagram at the bottom, it just says once the timer fires, it gets whatever bean that timer needs to fire on. So if it's a singleton bean, it'll be one bean. If it's a stateless bean, it'll go and get an instance out of the pool, inject whatever resources need to be injected in that bean, start a transaction, and then invoke your timeout method and do whatever it needs to do there. So straightforward, simple, nothing difficult there. So some things to remember around the timers and their features. So you can only use them on singleton and stateless bean, not and messaging beans as well, and not stateful beans. I know they sort of maybe in E8 they might do stateful beans, but at this stage it's just not there. If you aren't going to use a singleton bean and you sort of need to maintain state across the calls, like on a message-driven bean or a stateless bean, you're going to need to do that yourself. Like I said, the timer services do survive crashes. You can do your timers like a lot of the other things, either via annotation, or you can do it programmatically, so declaratively or programmatically. And this timer is going to go off. So, and then when we specify these timers, you specify which method to call when that happens. And there's two types, but sort of three types of timers. So the one is a time delayed one. So you're saying timer fire in 10 minutes or fire in 2 days. And then you've got calendar based ones as well, which is sort of say, okay, well, on this date, on Wednesdays at 10, do this, or every second week, that type of that sort of Linux cron type timers. And then you also get a interval time, which is say fire every 10 minutes, which is sort of like a time delayed, but more than once. So the declarative timers are the sort of preferred way of doing it. So you do that via annotation or via configuration file. So in your bean, in your singleton message-driven bean or stateless bean, you go and you annotate the method you want to fire at a certain time with the @schedule annotation. And on that schedule, you actually go and specify a cron type tab, cron like time, like see at the bottom here, we've to specify the second, the time, the day, month, the year, the week, whatever, all that type of stuff. on that method that you specified in, it either needs to be it's not allowed to return anything, and it must either take no parameter or it takes a timer. And with that timer that gets passed, you can get certain information about the timer. So when it's going to fire again, what information is around the timer. So if you've got hopefully not 10 different timers on a beam, you can go and see which one fired. And on a method as well, you can have multiple schedules on a single method. So you don't just have to have one schedule on a method. You can have, well, fire it every second Monday and every third Wednesday, let's say, as an example. So you can have that on there. And if you want to see if it's the Wednesday or the Monday one that's fired, you can add some information in there. And when you do get your time, you can do a get info from there to see what it's about. You can also actually set it as persistent. If you don't set the schedule as persistent, if the server does crash and come back up again, it's not going to, whatever time has elapsed or whatever happened, it's not going to remember that it's fired or that it needs to fire. So if you've got one that has to fire in 10 minutes and the server goes down and comes back up again, it's not going to know that to fire in 10 minutes. So you have to set persistent, then you've got an info there's one, like I said, that's to use that to sort of discern between the different timers if you've got more than one that's firing there. Then that cron example, the second minute, that types of the default set for timers, that's one of the important things you need to know, sort of what that means, what the defaults are. So if you don't specify any timing there, the default will be 0 seconds, 0 minutes, 0 hour, which is midnight. And then your day of month, year, week will be any day of the week. So it will be a wildcard, a star character. So if you don't specify, that's what's going to happen. So if you want to...
So there's a lot of timers right now. If you haven't specified, they go off at midnight.
Yeah. So they'll ask you in the exam, you'll have questions where they give you a specific schedule in and say, when will it fire? And you'll have to specify, or how many times will it fire, or will it fire at all? So the only sort of trick there is that seconds, minutes, and hour, you have to go and specify. So if it uses a default, it's going to be 0, and the 0 is like 0 minute or 0 hour, which is the start of the hour or the end of the hour. Then with the schedules as well, it goes a bit further, so you can have single values like the example on there, or you can have lists and ranges and increments and all types of different things. So they're not going to ask a simple one like this. They're going to ask you lists and ranges and what that means. And it works a lot like the timer one. There's a timer one in the Brickroad programmers exam. I think there's a timer date time thing there as well. I think, if I remember correctly.
You're talking about the time format, the dates?
There's some other date time thing. I don't know. I kind of remember something about it. So it sort of works the same way.
Date formatting and locales. So maybe you're talking about locales.
There's something you can specify date range and shit like that as well. Well, whatever, I sort of remember something. But anyway, it sort of works a lot like that as well. So
in Java 8, you've got Yoda times.
Yeah.
But it's not like a trigger or anything.
No. So for the declarative stuff, the schedule, that the time is specifying, they like to ask that. And how many times we'll find when it'll fire and all that type of stuff. Then the next one is a programmatic timer. So the difference, and when you would use a programmatic versus a declarative timer, its programmatic timer will be somebody ordered something online and then you only want to set up a timer. Use it for that way. Something like a declarative timer is something that you know is going to happen, like doing a backup or doing some audit or doing some compression or something that you know ahead of time, that's when it's going to happen. Where programmatic timers are more part of a business process, and that's where you use those. So you create them via the timer service object. So once again, you can inject that using that resource, or you can get it from the EGB context. So on your timer service is a bunch of different create timer type methods. So it's create timer for calendar, create timer for single event, all that sort of things. So you'll need to know those. And in the exam, they might ask you one that isn't there. And when you create those, you sort of say create timer, and then you go and pass in a schedule expression, or some of the ones you just pass in a long or a date. So if you're saying, well, I want this to fire a specific date, you just pass in the date. Or if you want to use that sort of cron type scheduling, you can use a schedule expression. And you can also pass in a timer config. And the timer config is the stuff where you set up your persistent. So if you want that timer to be persistent or not, and any info. And the info there is, although with the declarative one, it's a string, if you do it programmatically, it can be any object, because that get info on the timer service actually returns a object. It doesn't return a string. So you'll use that for that. other thing that they've got around the timers here is around serializing timers. So if you want to
sort of doing it wrong, if you're serializing it.
Yeah, so there's a difference between I think the programmatic ones you can serialize, you can't serialize the other ones, whatever, but you get an handle on this. So if you get your timer handle, you can actually serialize that timer. So and the reason you want to serialize it is if you want to pass that timer to another bean for whatever reason, you can do that. So if it needs to go across the wire, it needs to be serialized, you can do that.
Yeah, 2001 call.
And then with programmatic timers, the bean that you actually do that timer service on, that's the bean that's going to call the timer. And on that bean, you're only allowed to have one timeout method. So unlike with the declarative ones, we can have multiple scheduled timers methods on there. For programmatic timer, we can only have one timeout method. And the way you indicate that timeout method is by annotating with using the @timeout annotation above it, or you can implement the timed object interface, which has a timeout method, I think. So you're only allowed one per class if using programmatic timers. Then just managing timers. So basically, when you do call that timeout method or the scheduled method it gets called, you can use the one which passes the timer object in there. So with that timer interface, you can get your get handle back, which you can use to serialize the thing or not. You can cancel that timer. You can go and see when the next timeout is. Get your schedule, which will be a schedule expression. So if you want to see what was in there, get the time remaining. So when that thing is going to fire again. And then you can also see if it is a calendar timer, so if it's using that cron, and then if it is persisted or not. So that's what you sort of use to manage that. The other thing around timers is transactions, and they like asking that in the exam as well. And that'll be if a timer is created in a transaction, like programmatically, and the transaction is rolled back, the timer isn't created at all. If the timer fires and the exception is thrown in that method that the timer is running, the transaction will be rolled back and the timer will be fired at least one more time.
Yeah, but
afterwards.
In production, I've never really seen people use EJB timers over ports because of that problem exactly. That these exceptions happen, what do you do? There's no graceful comeback with that.
I think the amount of times it'll retry it should at least try once, but it's also container specific. They might try more than once, so they might wait 5 minutes before they retry again or whatever. But the specifications it'll try at least one more time. So for the certification exam, you'll need to know that, but in real life, you probably
try to get an exception. Use ports.
I think Tommy uses quartz in anyway.
Everyone uses quartz now. Embedded, you don't even get to compare it.
All right, so for the demo, I'm not going to sit and type a lot here. I just want to sort of show the differences between the two and how it's set up. View. Presentation. All right, so for this, I've just got a bean that's got a declarative timer and one that uses programmatic ones. And then a controller, which I'm just going to use for the programmatic one. For the programmatic one, you have to actually, something has to fire. It needs to be part of a business process to get that timer to kick off. Where the declarative timer doesn't need to be kicked off. When the container starts up, it goes through all the beans and it goes and sets up all their timers for you. So one thing I just wanted to show you, just with the auto completion. So if I go and say, hour here, don't auto complete it for me. If I go and say hour here, you can sort of see that the hour default is 0, where stuff like the half, month, and month, the default is a little wildcard. So it can be anyone. So it's the only thing that's sort of different. Everything is wildcards except the hours, minutes, and seconds. So this will be any hour. So schedule is set up to fire every 10 seconds, and this one's set up to fire every 5 seconds for every minute and every hour. And because the day, month, and all that is wildcard, so it'll be the whole time. And all this is sort of just prints out and say, listen, I've been fired. So when I start up the container, as soon as the container is started, you should start seeing the log info coming through for those timers firing. So this has already been packaged. So I'm just going to do a Tommy run. And I notice with Tommy, as soon as the container starts, it fires those events already, even though
it's probably using persistent timers in the database.
Yeah, so it's might have picked it up before. So you can see, so the server started in 1.3 seconds. Oh, let's see, now it didn't fire immediately. Okay, and fire. Why is this not firing?
So Tommy will use ports, right?
Oh, wait.
Ports
No, you know what I think I did? I think I'd probably, let me just repackage it.
Well, maybe clean it, and then we'll delete your target folder with your...
No, I think I was testing because they said the programmatic ones, I stopped the declarative ones. Because otherwise the logs are all declarative, programmatic, all mixed in. But I don't just do these on the fly. I tried them out beforehand, and I probably did it with the programmatic ones. You see, so that I should do it on the fly. So you can see there every 5 seconds, and there every 10 seconds. Every 5 seconds will fire again, and that's declarative. Just starts up when the container starts up, it goes, and that's it. So pretty straightforward and simple.
Caveat: WebSphere has a history of really poor EJB.
Oh, just yeah, no,
you have to go delete them.
Yeah, no, I know. I've been there, done that.
So maybe just tell them that not every container is as eloquent as Tommy.
Yeah. So yeah, because WAS, yeah, I've had the same thing. We actually have to go and delete the timers and recreate them because they get
every time that the container restarted.
Yeah.
We went and deleted
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what causes that or if it's been fixed in like 8, but in 7. Not.
8.55 still there.
Yeah, so if the container sort of crashes or doesn't go down gracefully, you're definitely going to have to recreate those timers. Let's see, any questions? Nothing. Okay, so the declarative timers pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to comment these out because I don't want to loot the logs of all different types of things going through. So for the programmatic timer, so like I said, what you've got there, so you inject it with the add resource, the same way you'll get the context or anything like that. Inject it there. Got a timer config. Like with the timer config, you're going to set your info. And the info here, the parameter there is any object. So I'm setting a string there. And then the set persistence, set to false. So I've got 2 methods on this bean. One is to start timer, one is to stop the timer. So to start the timer, I'm using a scheduled expression, using the cron stuff, so every 5 seconds. And then using the timer service, I create a calendar timer, pass in schedule expression and the timer config. And then to stop it again, you use my timer service again, get all the timers set on that bean, go and find the one that is set to the info I'm looking for. Like I said, that's why we use that info to go and identify specific timers, find it, go and cancel it so we stop it. And then on this one's timeout method, using the timeout annotation, I just go and say, listen, I fired. Okay, so let's just repackage it. The open certificate or the certification example one that goes Lavsky, it's got a bit more involved demo of that. So if you want to really get into it, you can go and have a look at that demo. So I'm just going to use Postman again. So you can see at the bottom here, there's nothing happening, no timers are fired yet. So I'm actually just going to tell the timer to start. So you can see there it starts firing now, and it's going to fire every 5 seconds until I stop it. So if I go and I call the stop method on it now, so you can see it found the timer stopping it, and I won't fire again. One thing to know is that every time you say start a timer, it's not going to find the original one and restart it. It's going to create a new timer every time. So if I actually go and I start like 2 or 3 timers here, it's not going to be the same timer I'm restarting. It's actually going to start 2 or 3 timers. So if I go and I actually start 3 different timers, you'll see it fires 3 times every time now. So that's just something to keep a note of. If you're going to use something like a stateless bean, and you're setting up a timer like something like a post construct or somewhere like that, every time an instance starts up, it's going to recreate a new timer. So if you're going to have 50 instances of a stateless bean, you're going to have 50 timers going off. Yeah, so if you're going to kill one, depending on how you've set up, how you're going to kill them, so the way I've got it set up there is I say go and find if the info is this info, cancel it. So if I've given different infos for each one, I can go and cancel them individually, but if I just say if it's the same info, I can cancel them all at the same time. So if I go and stop them now, you'll see it actually found 3 of them. So stopping timer, it found 3 of them and stopped all of them. So depending on how you've set up your info on that timer, you can go and stop them individually or whatever you want. But in sense of that is a danger. If you are going to be using timers like that, rather don't do it on like a post construct or something like that. If you have to, there's a lot of code you're going to put around it to actually make sure you're not going to start up 50 of those for every instance of a stateless bean that gets going.
So JE7 has actually brought in the ability to daisy chain schedules. So you can actually create schedule groups.
So JE7 create schedule daisy chains.
So you can create schedule groups, and the schedule groups, and you can stop a schedule group. So they kind of
So instead of finding every single timer, you group those timers together and then just
schedule group.
Okay. Okay, so that's timers. Then sort of it's the difference, declarative and programmatic timers, when to use them, the cron calendar stuff, how those work, and then transactions, when they get started or creating transactions and they get rolled back, what happens. All right, so last topic is implementing security. So it's just understanding how security works. Once again, declarative and programmatic security. And then they've got one of those things around, we did it in the first topic, the different roles that's sort of around EJB, so your deployer and your bean developer and your system administrator, those things. In security, they bring that back in again. And they sort of ask, what role will this person, so the sysadmin will probably set up your users on your web server, but your deployer will go and link those roles back to your actual application roles, that type of questions. So you have to be aware of those. If you go through the study notes and that, it's all explained there. So we're looking at security there. So just understanding security and all that works. I'm sure at this stage, all of you have worked with and know the difference between authentication and authorization. So authentication is verifying a person is who he is, and authorization is saying what this person is allowed to do. The other terms that you should need to understand is the difference between users, groups, and roles. So a user is a user, an individual. A group is a way that you group users together, and roles are a way that you group functions in our application. So a certain role will be allowed to do certain things. So an administrative role will be able to go and change configurations on the system, where a data capture role will only be allowed to capture data, but maybe not delete it. You might have to be a supervisor role. So if you've got a role, you can have groups that belong to a role or a user that belong to a role. But roles are sort of the way that you sort of group those, what a certain function can do in the application, and that's a grouping use. And that's also where the whole EJB security works around roles. It's not users or groups, it works around roles. So with a user's linked to that role or group is linked to that role, you're using roles everywhere. So the JE security uses the Java Authentication Authorization Service, or JAS. YAS? How would you say this? It's not JAS.
That's a real good name for it.
YAS. YAS.
Yeah, JAS.
You just jazz up your security.
We in the industry say JAS.
I want to change that. I want
to
jazz.
No.
Yeah. I want to use jazz.
No.
I'm bringing that in. So for the rest of this, I'm going to call it jazz, not jazz. Sounds like you're stuttering. Jazz. So Jazz takes care of your security, and it's sort of responsible for creating that principal object. And if you remember back from the context stuff from EJB context, one of the functions on that interface is get principal, and that principal sort of tells you who's logged in and who's been authenticated for that. The Jazz also allows you to do that authentication at any level in the tier, so whether it's at the web level, at your EJB level, wherever, it doesn't matter where that authentication happens. Using that principle, you can the container passes that principal object around, and that's how every sort of tier knows who's been authenticated. You have to re-authenticate in every single tier, because that'll just drive users crazy. So the Jazz is used for the authentication authorization steps, and I say the principal object is a shareable, validated object. You can pass it around and say what's happened there. So just as a way of demonstration, so you've got Jazz sitting somewhere in your container there. Your different tiers talk through that to whatever is being used for the authentication system in the backend. So if you using Glassfish or JBoss or WebSphere, whatever it uses to do its authentication authorization, Jazz is the level, is the layer on top of that. So like I say, sort of between if your web tier authenticates it, it'll be passed to your EJB tier. That result will be passed through to that. The other thing they bring in with the EJB is the difference between your web tier and your EJB tier. And if you're doing the web services and REST certification that we're doing next, they bring the security bit in again as well. So if you studied well now, you'll know it for that as well, because they actually ask a lot of questions around security in the web services one. And for the EJB one, you sort of need to understand the difference between the web tier one and what the web tier versus the EJB one, and how the differences are in setting up the security on the web level and on the EJB tier. So the big difference is like the web tier, it's set up in the web.xml, where on the EJB one, it's set up on your deployment descriptor. And then you can go and look at and read up a bit about it. So for the certification, you just need to be aware of it, but it's done on the 2 different levels. I don't think you actually need to know exactly how it's set up on the web layer. But on your web layer, it'll look something like that. So you'll have your login config set up. So if you've got a servlet or something, you actually specify how this user needs to authenticate, and then you've got form, basic, none, and something else. Can't remember now. You need to know this for the web services one. And depending on the type of authentication you've got there, you'll have certain other settings. So for form authentication, you'll obviously have to tell it what form to use for it. For basic authentication, it will just ask you to authenticate. And then depending on the client using, the browser and so on, you might have a...
I remember now, we even went into SAML in the web services.
Yeah, so you have to, so it'll pop up. So it'll pop up and ask you that, and then you actually go and secure your different web resources. Once again, your auth constraints on. So for a web deployment one, and I've just got a little example here. So on there, you've got your EJB type stuff, and then there you go and set up your security roles for that specific bean, the user on there, and then you go and link your roles to it and all that. So you'll see, so the web one and the EJB one, they look different, but in the background, they're performing the same type of thing, and they're all going through Jazz. Through Jazz. One thing I just wanted to show, and this is, they like asking these type of questions, and on the Ivan study notes as part of the declarative security, they've got this thing which sort of shows how the different parts fit together. So how it fits together from what's in your code to what's in your deployment descriptor for your bean to your EJB container back to your actual container itself, and how those different things fit together. So you need to be aware of this, because they sort of like to ask questions where they'll show you the different setups and sort of ask you what code to use, what role would you need to identify there. So on your enterprise bean, you kind of specify what roles need to be there. You link that role to a role on your EJB container, and that role you link back to a role on your actual server, whatever that's being used for. So you can go read up about that, but just be aware of it. That's something you need to know. And if you're doing the REST certification, you need to know this. They love asking this. So for a declarative one, once again, we're using annotations there, or you can use the deployment descriptor. So the 2 main ones, there's your declared roles. So the declared roles sort of say which roles that specific bean is going to use. Not necessarily what rights I've got, but what roles are going to be available in that bean. So you can go and say declare roles, give those roles names. And when the bean gets set up, it sort of says like, well, this specific bean, these roles are going to come into it. I don't know. It comes more around to, when it comes around to actually saying what those roles are allowed to do, you're going to have the roles allowed annotation. So the roles allowed you can actually put on your class level or at the method level. But like with the transactions from last week, you probably want to put the most restrictive roles allowed at the top, maybe no roles, and then down at the lower bottoms actually have specific roles for specific methods. And so this roles allowed is, I say, sort of the crux of the whole declarative security, where you go and set up what is allowed to do what, when, and how, and all that. Then you've also got a permit all and a deny all annotation, and they pretty much are what they say they are. Permit all means anybody can exit it, but they need to be at least authenticated. And deny all means nobody's allowed to enter that. So you might use that with if you have some other method that unsecure and you want to stop it, you probably will do that by the deployment descriptor, just stop people from being able to call that method or whatever else. And you've also got a run as annotation, and that's if you need to execute or run a bean in a different security context. Reasons for doing that might be if you've got something like a message-driven bean or a timer service, which needs to go and call another bean which you have to be authenticated for. In that case, you've got no security context running there. So in that case, you'll use the run as annotation to run that. But you'll probably set it up so it's very restricted to just only be able to call that method. So you might have a timer bean role, which you'll use for that. Or timer bean
I saw
user.
this in apps, they implemented SAML, and then SAML plugs into the actual role usage, the local role usage. So I've seen this in one wild example.
Yeah, so because it kind of opens you up, because you're kind of faking a login, which doesn't actually happen. So if it's sort of admin level type runners, then no, don't go there. Then you've got programmatic security as well. Once again, like all the other things, if you have to choose between declarative and programmatic, always go for declarative. It's easier to audit, easier to know what's going on. With programmatic, the reason you do something like programmatic is if you've got some weird security check you need to do. So you might have to be that the guy needs to be in a certain role, but he mustn't be in another role. So he needs to be a supervisor, but he mustn't be an admin, that type of thing. So if you're doing weird security checks like that, which isn't just because the declarative ones can only do positive checks. Do you belong to a role? Not do you not belong to a role? So if you have to do any weird type of stuff like that, you use programmatic security for that. And like a lot of the other stuff, you get it via the EJB context. And from the EJB context, you can retrieve your principal and you say, use the current principal. So that's not going to work if you're like in a timeout method or in a message-driven bean. There's not going to be no security context. If you say get principal, you're going to get nothing. It's going to be null. So the two things you get from your principal object there is you can say is caller in role. So that's sort of doing the same type of check as roles allowed. So that's what you'll do for that. So you do a is caller in role, you'll sort of say, does this caller belong to the admin group? Does he belong to the supervisor group? Whatever role, not group, role he belongs to. And then also just get your caller principal. We actually get the details about the users logged into, and you can do sort of a get name on that, but there's no standard way of what that get name is going to return for you. It might be the actual guy's login details. It might be his AD account. Whatever is underlying the jazz, that's whatever's going to be to return. So it's not a great way to check anything. Don't use that. Doing this sort of security check, if you are going to use programmatic security, make use of interceptors where possible. So you can sort of do the same thing what interceptors are for. So you can take away your whole mixing up your business logic with whatever other cross-cutting concerns you've got. So if you're going to use programmatic security, look at using interceptors when doing it. Then just some best practices around security, like I said, sort of use declarative security where possible. It's much easier to analyze, and there's no debugging and stuff you need to do there. Let's also define your most restrictive roles at the top level of your bean, and then rather go down and be more fine-grained around your specific method. So either permit all or specific roles need to go in there. So I almost say sort of you can sort of go and say roles allowed at the top of your bean, just say no roles allowed. Don't do a deny all though. So also, as I say, avoid working with principal.getName. I said that get name, there's no standard way of it being returned. And you also shouldn't use that as a way to look at security. So if again, you're looking for specific usernames or user groups, because that is dependent on the actual security system. So that will be different between different systems, and it won't be portable at all. And if you're going to put in code specifically to go and see if username is equal to Rory, like I said, sort of then I don't know what you're doing there, but that's bad. Or if user group is equal to BBD discovery users, that's also bad. So make use of roles. That's what if you want to kind of set up specific logic or stuff or security, use the roles. Don't use users or groups ever. And then, like I said, for the exam, know the different roles around setting up beans, the deployer, the bean developer, that type of stuff, and what they do, what they're responsible for. And also just the deployment descriptor, the security roles, links, and so on, like I said, sort of from, where is that? from this little bit here, understand what each one of those tags do and where they get set up, because these sort of setting up and linking your roles to users and groups aren't done programmatically at all. You have to do that in the deployment descriptor. And you need to know this for the exam. So just go back and check, make sure you understand that. Here's a demo, security demo. So for this, I've just gone back to, what's the guy's name? Gromolowski. And this sort of, yeah, so what he's got here is he's got a security controller, which we go and call, and he's got sort of the same implementation for the same interface, and each bean has got a different security requirement. So he just, whatever role you logged in as, he goes and calls all 4 of those different beans and sees what the result is. So if you go into one of the beans, so the normal straightforward one, if you call login role, it actually says who the principal is on that. And then for each role, it goes and sees if that specific user is in that role, and just prints it out. And it does it for each one of those. So you can sort of see that's all that happens here. It just goes through, and that's the same type of thing on all of them. See if I go and package this. I need to, let me just repackage it. They can tell me run it. So for the exam access, sort of, it's all about the different roles and how it works. The actual annotations, what it looked like an error, didn't it? Oh, should maybe stop the other one. Which one? No, I'm on the wrong one now. Get out of security. One is still running. Stop it. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Using Postman again. I go to call the security. So at this stage, I've got no authorization. So it should actually, all of those methods require authorization. So if I try and call it, it'll just give me a, what? Oh, it's probably cached. Damn it. Okay. So it's actually cached my previous one. So I've logged in as employee. And you can sort of see if when I go and call it, goes and calls all 4 of those beans. So it calls the security implementation one. You can see the principal name is employee. He only belongs to the employee role. And then if we go to the permit all, that's allowed. See there. And if we go to the secured one where your admin role is required, you can see we get an EJB access exception, so it's not authorized to do that. And then with the other ones, the programmatic one gets, it says I'm an employee, running an admin required method, and it's the runners and all that is fine. So it's, so if I go to back here and actually go and log in as the admin guy, and send it again. So the only real difference here is if we go and call the one where the admin role is required for this specific call, we can see it goes in there now, the guy's an admin, and it returns fine. So
it keeps your authentication for you, your username and password.
Yeah, it seems that way. I just want to see basic auth. Let's say clear, update request. So if I call it now, you can see, so because it's not authorized, we get a ADP authentication error because it's not authorized.
You can do servlet authentication on top of EJB certification.
Yeah, so you can do the servlet authentication. If you authenticate it there, that principal object will be passed down to your EJB as well. So that's the whole, that's what Jazz does for you. Jazz. You just jazz up your security. And that's it. I don't think there's anything else I actually want to show you. The only thing is, so you can go and look at all of the books. If you want to play around with the security, all of the books sort of show you how to set it up in Glassfish, how to set up your realm and your different users there. And that works fine. If you want to do it in Tommy, you can go and look at the certification exams, and it uses the Tomcat type stuff. So you set up your different roles there, and then you set up your users. So these users are linked to these roles, and then the roles get linked up in the actual declared roles and all that on different bits here. And then on the web, so you can see it's our web security. This is set up to use, it's set up to authenticate all these pages, and the config is basic and the realm is default. So if you set up different realms, you can set up. So the Tommy ones, you can look at the open EJB certification things we've got from the Jamalski guy. The Glassfish ones, all the books pretty much use Glassfish, and you can set it up on there. If you want to go wildfire, you're probably going to have to do CLI there. You're going to have to type little fingers. You know, so I don't recommend doing it on one of the big containers. Actually, exit presentation mode. See if there's any questions. Nothing. All right, so that's it for the last topic. So for the last few minutes, just want to go through the certification exam and what's going to happen next and what to expect. So the exam is the 895 exam. You're going to write. Duration is 110 minutes for 60 questions. So it's a little less than 2 minutes per question. The passing score is 73. So from all the certification exams, I think it's just the mobile edition, which has got the same level, like passing score, also like 73. Most of the other certification exams are like in the 60, 63, 65. So they generally adjust these scores based on how easy or difficult it is. And obviously how high the passing score is, how easier it is. So this is an easier exam than the other ones. If you're looking at the scores, might not be for everybody. So don't study less for it, but like I said, it's got quite a high passing rate to pass it. So the other ones, the program and associate one was at 63, 65. Where this one is actually at 73.
It changes like every month. They really just decide to move it. This hasn't really changed.
Yeah. So you can go and write the exam even if you haven't done the programmers one yet. You just won't get the certification. If you want the actual certification, you have to go and finish your programmers one, and for your programmers one, you have to have finished your associate one. But if you want to go and write the exam, go and write it now. Don't wait until you do the programmers and then come back to this. While this is all fresh in your mind, go and write it. So when you do your programmers, you'll get the programmers and this at the same time. So for the preparation, the study guides are really good for this. So go and reread those study guides again. If you've done it, go reread them again. Make sure you understand that. Go and look at the little attributes one at the back of the Word document I showed you last week. And then just go through those and just see if all of those make sense to you. If they don't, it's probably a topic you just want to go and reread again.
So, interviews also.
Yeah.
Not that you people should be interviewing.
So go through these, see that you understand if you look at those things, you understand what it's about, when to use it, what best practice are for it. So you can almost look at that annotation and recite a little story about it. If there's any topics that you want to know more about, if the study note doesn't, the study notes are very short. It gives you just the basics of it, but if you want to have a deeper understanding of it, the supplementary reading material, go and read on them. Each week's topics, I've put in the supplementary reading for that, so it'll go and say where to go and read that up. All the classes that we've done are on YouTube. I think the first 2 weeks will just be on Rory's page, and the last few weeks will be on my YouTube page. So if you go to the YouTube links, and I think we've sent out that email so many times.
I follow you on YouTube. You're like a celebrity.
So we've sent out linked a few times. It's one of those tiny CCURLs. Just go back to that page and see all those ones. So if you want to go and see any of the things in the class again, do the mock exams. For the EJB one, I found the mock exam for the EJB one is very close to the actual certification exam. If you do well on those and you understand those, you'll definitely do well in the EJB exam. On the InfoWave, if you've used it before, once you've done sort of, I think the EJB one has 4 or 5 different exams. Do the first one, go and look at the topics, see which ones you scored under 70% or you didn't feel happy about, and go and reread those topics, make sure you understand it. And go and do the coding. Go download those other examples we did in the class from GitHub, or go and look at that Gamaski guys ones and play around with it, run it, change things, press different buttons, see what happens. That really helps to sort of get it sort of solidified in what's happening with those different annotations, what they do, how they work. And with the mock exams, when you're going through the questions after you've written them, understand why questions are wrong, answers are wrong, and why those answers are correct, especially why they are wrong. The Info one also gives a lot of detail. Some of the things that actually refers back to the EJB 3.1 specification. If I'd suggest sort of if there's one that you don't understand and it's actually referring to the specification and the answer, the explanation of the answer, go and read it. It won't hurt, and it'll sort of, sometimes I've sort of found that the books and all that explained it, but reading the specification is just a bit plainer and tells you what it's about. So what's going to happen next is Rory will probably send out a attendance form for you that you need to sign and return. So you can either scan it and send it back, or actually just drop it at Rory's desk or cage, where they're keeping you. Where they're keeping you these days. So, but Rory will just say in his email where to return it to. And depending on how people did for the quizzes and attendance, you'll get asked if to go and write the certification exam as well. So Lynn will probably contact you for that. So get a date that you're going to write it.
She'll eventually contact you.
You can take study leave for the exam. It's a normal exam, so it's normal study leave. Things apply. So just go and ask whoever your.
And if you pass, you get 1 free.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
You used that?
Yeah, I used it. So another thing, if you do pass the certification, you get another day's leave as well. It's discretionary leave. So it doesn't come off your annual leave. It's not an extra day. It's the discretionary leave that you can go and ask your project manager to get off as well. I used quite a few of those. Those were awesome. You can backdate them. If you haven't written an Oracle exam before, you need to go and create a Pearson VUE account for your Oracle certification. So just go onto the website and use your BBD email address for that, because when Lynn books it, then she's going to use your BBD email address to link it up.
I would rather give her your personal account, so she'll book it against that account number. A lot of people, they book it and then you get a new person VUE, not linked to your account. And you
if you've got an existing one, let her know about it. But whatever, I'm pretty sure the people who are doing this have written an associate program exam before. I said, remember to take your photo IDs when you go. You don't need a pen and paper for the exam. They'll give you one, whichever one you go and write at. And then whatever you do to de-stressify before the exam, either arriving 5 minutes before it or arriving 5 hours before it, is that. When you're writing it, just remember the 2-minute rule. So if you've done the program or associate one, a lot of the questions have sort of like a page full of code on there, which you need to go and look through and see what's happening, or the answers might have reams of code. The EJB one, not that much. And I think you also saw from the quizzes we've done and so on, there's not like a lot of code. So it should be easy enough that if you go and take a glance at that question and sort of see what this question is about. So go and look, sort of have this, not this specific picture, whatever picture you've got in your mind about what are we looking at. Are they testing session beans, singletons, message-driven stuff? Are they testing security, transactions, timers, exceptions? What are they trying to test on that? Use it. Take on, see what they're trying to test there. Is it sort of a bean type or container service? Have you seen a question like this during the mock exams or maybe earlier in one of the other questions? And so I'd really identify, get your mindset, okay, well, this is about message-driven beans. Let me get my message-driven bean hat on. I'm going to look at this question. Take a minute, look at it, see if you can understand. If you're looking at it and it doesn't make sense, there might be some of those, especially of security. Don't waste time on it. Remember, these questions are all weighted the same. So whether you answer 10 difficult ones or 10 easy ones, it's 10 points. That's it. You're not going to get more points for answering more difficult questions. If there's a question that doesn't make sense or it's taking longer than 2 minutes, flag it and go on. Don't waste time on it.
And your talk you're doing at the Jug.
Oh yeah, and then I'm doing a talk on Monday at the Jug before the main thing, so it'll be like on the side there, maybe in the parking lot, I'm not sure. Like a little taste. So I'm doing a talk on certifications and Java certifications on Monday at Discovery. If you haven't RSVP'd yet, I think for the senior talk there's space left, but not for the junior. Okay, so there is a waiting list, but I'm sure just pitch up, whatever. So that's there. So for the exam, this is a possible breakdown of what an amount of questions for the different topics that are going to be there. It's not necessarily going to be the exact same, but I looked on CodeRanch and it's not too much difference in the guys who posted this on there. So you can sort of see around the actual beans. There's quite a lot of questions around session beans and messaging-driven beans and singletons and stateful. There is stuff around security. So there's only 4 questions. I can promise it'll be 4 difficult ones. And then actual deployment stuff, there's 4 questions. So you can see it's covering every single topic that we did. There's no topic that they're not covering. And the difficulty, sort of say, maybe your EJB exception handling, those 4 questions might be easy. And your 5 questions around singleton beans might be like tough ones that you can answer. So the actual split around easy, difficult, they can go anywhere. So one thing just notice, like I said, every single topic is important. There's no topic that they're asking less questions about. The web services exam is a bit skewed. There they ask, like, most of the questions come from best practices, and then the next most come from security, and then the rest are like 3-4 questions per topic. But for the EJBs, it's sort of spread evenly across all of them. And if anybody has any additional questions, they can probably ask me about the certification. Just ping me, direct message me, whatever, to get, if you want some more information about that. So for this week, there's no reading, there's no class next week. But for this week's mock exam, instead of doing it just on security and timers, you're actually going to do a full-on mock exam, like you're going to write the exam. So it needs to be 60 questions long. So for info, you can't set the time though, but it defaults to the less than 2 minutes per question anyway. Yeah. So what you need to do is you need to go and set up 60 questions. Doesn't matter what topics, doesn't matter how difficult or easy they are, doesn't matter. Just set it up 60 questions, need to get 73%. And when you write it, try and write it like you're actually doing the certification exam. Have a piece of paper next to you, do the 2-minute rule, flag the questions, do all that. So just sort of getting into that mindset and getting that done. Once again, do a screenshot of it and just upload it. We've set the deadline for Sunday, but we could maybe extend it. Yeah, so we'll extend it to next Sunday. So you've got like a week to do it. But start studying for the EJB exam. There's probably going to be a bit of an overlap. So you've got a month before the web services certificate. Yeah, so the web services, you probably saw the email yesterday on web services. So we're starting that the 23rd of September. If there's enough interest, if there's only 2 people, probably not going to do it.
If we don't get enough interest, we'll probably do the associate.
Yeah, so depending on the amount of interest that's there, I'll let you guys know. So it's a month before that. If you haven't written the EJB certification and you want to do the web services and there's a bit of an overlap with your exam and the certification, we can probably give some leeway there for quizzes and so on if you need to go and write the EJB exam, so you don't have to worry about the web services quizzes like the first week. Just let us know. So you've got a month for that. So try and do the EJB certification for the next 3 weeks if possible. It's not the most difficult exam. If you pass the programmers, you can definitely do EJB. Although, I don't know, sort of, they always go back to you did so freaking well in the web services, and they didn't do so well in the EJB one.
I think if you get the kind of I'm on holiday vibe, afterwards.
Yeah.
You need to carry on the learning and keep it fresh in your mind. If you go, oh yeah, of course it's finished, now I can go drink myself into a stupor.
Yeah. So I think it sort of book the exam in the next 3 weeks, get the date set, sort of say this is what I want to go and write, and let's work towards that. Don't go and say, okay, listen, I want to go over all the details first, want to go through the mock exams, and once I'm sure I know everything, then go and book the exam. I find it's easier if you actually book the exam now, and you sort of say, well, I've got until, I don't know, the 19th of September to go and write this, and I go and write it. And just put yourself under some pressure. There's no question. So, you've got any other? So I found the EJB exam easy. It wasn't tricksy. They didn't ask any funny things. If you know the exam topics, you do well in the mock exams, you should do fine there. After doing the programmer's exam, I found the EJB one was way easier. So if you struggle with the programmers, but you passed it, I think you'll be fine for EJB. I think I got close to 90.
No, you got in the 80s.
87 or something, 86.
Yourself and Andre were the first ones to get it, and then from that we got our specialization.
Yeah.
So, and the specialization got us in the door with RFPs and then brought us business.
Yeah. So I think the ones I need to go back.
So
I think the ones where security got me. Like I say, so the security stuff is really difficult. They ask you a lot about the declarative stuff and the different things. Like my exams, basically security, I think, is where I kind of dipped a bit. Maybe packaging deployment, if I remember, somewhere around there. That's it. All right. So the attendance keyword for today is pass. I can pass the exam. No class next week. If you guys have any additional questions or anything else you want to know, or if there's something you're struggling with on glassfish, don't ask me. Something you're struggling with on Tommy, ask Rory. There's something on wildfly, ask Rory. He's done the training. If it's on WAS, I don't know what you're doing with WAS. You shouldn't be using WAS. So. All right.
I just want to say thank you to Tobias for actually leading the certification. He set the bar incredibly high. And I think that I'm looking forward to the web services because I learned a lot from your teachings on this also. And we've got great material now, absolutely incredible material that we use next year. We're all around.
Yeah. Because of the web services certification doesn't have as much material as the EJB. Reading wise. But yeah, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to. All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye.